You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. This is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Super excited to interview a friend. Today, Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. Very excited today because it was well overdue for me to connect with this colleague and hopefully a friend now, Dr. Andrew Moffat. Andrew graduated with a degree in veterinary science from Massey University, Palmerston, North New Zealand in 2006. He began his veterinary career in England and completed an executive MBA class business school whilst living in London. In 2011, he established VetnCare, growing network of veterinary hospitals in the Bay Area, right? It's sort of that location. These days, Andrew's main focus are on new graduate mentorship, veterinarian recruitment, and clinical leadership and operations. Andrew, thank you so much for joining. Finally, we met. Very excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, great to be with you guys. I don't know if I qualify as an innovator, but awesome to be on your podcast, and we're overdue a catch up. Exactly right.
Well, let's start there with the innovator. I know you have a fascinating career, and we're all around the globe, everywhere as a veterinarian. So tell us, how did you end up from down under here, and what was the journey like?
Look, the journey was a real experience, and I don't know quite how I ended up here. That's a strange thing. It was sort of a little bit by chance, but I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and told my mum pretty proudly at the age of 5 that I wanted to be an animal doctor, and with firm conviction from that age. You know, it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. I didn't really have a plan B, and I was lucky enough to get into vet school at the University of Melbourne in 2000. And at that time, the University of Melbourne wasn't American accredited. And we were meant to get the accreditation my final year. But with about 6 months to go, we were informed by the dean that the university had missed out and they wouldn't get it to the following year, which means I was going to graduate without it. And I didn't know for sure I was going to practice in the US at that time, but I certainly wanted the option. And I'd just been to Massey Vet School in New Zealand on a student conference, and they had the accreditation already and were highly regarded in sort of down under. And my mum's a Kiwi, so being a half-breed, I could hop over the pond, and Massey accepted me on the condition that I repeated a year, because they wanted me to do at least a third of the degree to get the qualification. So I went back a year, which is probably a good thing, because I didn't show up to many classes the first time round, and it gave me a chance to just make sure I knew what I was dealing with. And that move to Massey was a real important change in my life, because when I left Melbourne, I was dead set on being a fish veterinarian. I was keen to get enrolled in the Masters of Agriculture program in Stirling, Scotland, and I was dead set on this. I had an amazing lecturer at Melbourne called Paul Hardy-Smith, who really inspired me to get into aquaculture, and with a love of fly fishing and diving. It was, I planned to move up to Prince Edward Island or somewhere off Canada like that and just hang out with on salmon farms the whole time. But when I went to Massey, I had some amazing clinical leaders and mentors on the small animal side. And it really, I think I realized that I love people as much as animals, and I wasn't getting as much contact with clients in an aquacultural setting. And I sort of repivoted. I moved back into an interest in clinical practice, and finished Massey with an aspiration to join a mixed animal practice, and got my first job in England. I didn't want to stay in New Zealand, not because it's not an amazing place, but there weren't a lot of jobs in small animal practice there. I didn't want to move back to Australia, having just moved away. And so I moved straight to England. I actually started my first job as a veterinarian in south of London, which at the time everyone was saying, oh, you can't do that. You know, you can't move countries as a new graduate. You've got to have numerous years experience. But I just went with my gut, and that too was a really influential move in my professional career to the UK, because I was able to go there and start clinical practice in an amazing mixed practice called Cliff Veterinary Group south of London. And it was a James Harriet style practice. Two of my mentors were phenomenal farm animal practitioners, and I had some great mentors on the small animal side, and they just threw me in, and it was a really advanced practice. I got exposed to a lot of great staff. So that was sort of the first part of my journey to America. I had the American accreditation from New Zealand, and I landed in the UK. And that was the start of my ability or interest in not only veterinary practice, but I then got immersed into sort of clinical leadership and business in a great way.
It's really interesting. You're the first guest, I believe, that repeated some vet school, just like my compadre here, Ivan. He actually did vet school twice.
Yeah, I did not only 1 year, but the whole vet school, because I didn't get it first time. So.
The whole vet school, yeah. Well, I'm pleased they didn't send me back to the start. I was running out of gas, but it was good to repeat final year. Not. I mean, the first time round, obviously, I was playing a lot of football in Melbourne, and so that was impacting my class time. Also spent probably a little bit too long in some of the pubs around Melbourne. But in New Zealand, it's quite strategic. The vet school's in somewhere very, very remote with not a lot of nightlife or distractions. So you're forced to study and pay attention. But it was a great experience because I really re-immersed myself in clinical practice, and the vet school in New Zealand was tremendous. The lecturers were brilliant, and it was a fantastic social class. And it was really one of the great experiences of my life that time, particularly at Massey Vet School in New Zealand. And with having done it the second time around, was able to really focus on the clinical experience. And I simultaneously, I'd always wanted to do my flying license. So I did my pilot's license at the same time just to fill in a few gaps, which was fun.
Yeah, that's what most veterinarians do.
That's right.
Like go take their pilot's license?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was so fortunate to travel 3 times with SmartFlow to New Zealand and to Australia. And Melbourne is my probably favorite city in the world. It's such a nightlife, and just the whole vibe there is different. One thing that someone told me that the coffee is better in Sydney than in Melbourne. Is that true?
I can't get involved. I can't get involved in those conversations. It's when you live in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne hate one another. They're very competitive.
For some reason, it's such a huge company. It was so funny. So with people in Melbourne, they said when you go to Sydney, tell them that the coffee is better in Melbourne.
Exactly.
It seems to rise the adrenaline a little bit.
Yeah. It does. It's funny when you're there, you're not a big fan of one another, but when you're overseas, I mean, you're all coming from the same spot, and that animosity tends to evaporate. Yeah. But yeah, Sydney and Melbourne, a little bit like San Francisco and LA, are pretty competitive, but both great.
New Zealand, right? And Australia also, they're like brothers, but then you compete. But if you're in America, Kiwi is almost like you're from the same land, right?
That's exactly. Well, I mean, America, Canada isn't too dissimilar. You guys will go to war together and help each other out, but on domestic terms, there's a little bit of
the best part is that Americans say that Canadians are the nicest people. And Canadians don't say that about Americans. So this is very interesting because how do they pretend? I'm not sure, but it's funny because, although they do make a lot of fun of Canadians as well. But anyway, we're a little off topic. So let's
I was just going to say, we've got an Australian, a Canadian, and a Ukrainian here. Let's not get into geopolitical conversations on the podcast.
That's right. It's almost the start of a joke, isn't it? But I got to the UK and joined practice there and had a great first experience in practice. And I truly believe that first year or two in practice really make or break someone's career. And I got really lucky. It was just a great experience with some great exposure to diverse clinical caseload and some phenomenal mentors that really changed my life and remain close friends and inspirations. But after a year or so, I wanted more, and there was a couple of emergency hospitals in a town called Brighton, not far away, and so I got introduced to those emergency hospitals, and after about a year in practice, started working at both those ERs, and I got to the point where I was doing.
There was Vets Now.
And was Vets Now, yeah, Vets Now, and I've forgotten the other service. There were 2 services about a similar size, and I started working for both of them, and it gave me exposure to an even higher case, sort of diversity of caseload, and often I was sole charge. So, as a 1-year graduate, I think I was, maybe 24 at the time, being thrown into that melting pot was tremendous, and the growth that I was able to achieve in that personally and professionally was sort of exponential. And I realized that as much as I love veterinary medicine, I actually liked leading clinical teams and helping the team achieve great patient and client outcomes. That was almost more fulfilling. It became more fulfilling for me than helping the patient individually. And I then moved into sort of practice operations. Saw a bit of a niche in the UK whereby, the UK is about 10 years ahead of America. And a lot of this consolidation that's happening here now was happening in the UK 15 years ago when I was there. And so I feel like, a little bit like Groundhog Day, we're going through it for the second time. But there was a niche there. There were corporate groups buying up smaller hospitals. A lot of the smaller hospitals didn't know what they were doing. They weren't run efficiently. They weren't able to realize their value. And so I saw an opportunity to go into these practices, help them with clinical ops, to restructure the business, get them up to a level of efficiency, and then help the owners sell those businesses. And I did that a couple of times and realized that this was, I had some ability to help these clinics realize a higher level of performance, which impacted, the team's capacity to do their jobs and patients and clients. And simultaneously, I got approached by CVS, who I think were and still are probably the biggest group in the UK, and started troubleshooting for them, whereby they would acquire larger groups of hospitals and they would send me in to help figure out the problems operationally. A lot of the sort of regional management at the time were from retail backgrounds and some really talented people, but didn't truly understand the nuances of clinical practice. And so they would send me in as sort of interim clinical directors to these groups to sort of reestablish things. And I had some amazing experiences and learned a lot, but also had some great successes that taught me a lot about change management, which is a passion of mine, and acquisition and transition. And I got to a point, I think one year I turned the business around and had a lot of great successes, and they didn't give me my bonus because they pegged my bonus to revenue growth. And we hadn't grown the business revenue much, but operationally we'd improved profit dramatically. And I was a little bit disappointed with that. But then I realized, well, what am I doing this for others? I reckon I can do this for myself. And that's when I started, looking for a practice to buy. But at that time in the UK, it was such a hot market. They might have, sort of like it is now. You're trying to get your foot in the door. I couldn't get a big enough loan. There were 40 other blood-hungry, consolidators trying to attack every clinic, and I just couldn't get a practice. And through the business school, there was an entrepreneurship centre at the school, and I was able to raise some money through them, which was a great experience. But even with that, I wasn't able to find a practice that really fitted the bill. And I was happy with a sort of rebuild practice. But at that time, the consolidators were just on everything. And I'd sort of given up on my dream of practice ownership. At business school, I got approached by a couple of human hospital organizations, and I was looking to take on a job as a human hospital administrator. And that's when I got a call from a buddy of mine from vet school, a guy called Jereb Leeper. And Jereb now runs a small clinic on Maui. But Jereb was 3 years below me at vet school, and we were buddies and always talked about owning a clinic. And his great uncle owned a clinic in Castro Valley, just outside the Bay. And Jereb, when he graduated, went straight there as a new graduate and been working in the clinic for 3 years or so. And somehow Jereb contacted me and said, "Hey, Moff, I really want to buy my uncle's vet clinic, but I don't know how to do it. Do you want to come and do it with me?" And I thought, this is my chance. And so my girlfriend at the time and I bought a one-way ticket and came to America to give it a crack. And the uncle didn't need a veterinarian at the time, so I had to come out here and get a job. And being Australian, I had access to the E3 visa, which is a tremendous visa, but you still need a job offer, and the employer still has to do a little bit easy peasy stuff on the Department of Labor. It's nothing like a petition for an HB visa or something like that. But I interviewed at maybe 6 different clinics, and I was overqualified. But at that time, there was a excess in veterinary applicants, and no one offered me a job because I think they had all these US applicants that were just easier. And so
Isn't
after
that
a
weird
month,
to remember those times?
oh my goodness. And I was so overqualified and I couldn't get a job. And I was going, what the hell? And so after 3 weeks, I said to my buddy, you won't believe it, I can't get a job here. No one will offer me a job. And I'm going to have to go home and give up, go back to the UK with my tail between my legs that I, couldn't make it in America. And Jared called his uncle, Russ Hackler. And I think Russ felt sorry for me. And I think Russ had 5 vets at the time, didn't need me. But overnight, he offered me a job. And I think Joe and I had like only $1,000 left in our pocket. And Russ gave me another $1,000. And that $2,000 allowed me to put a deposit on an apartment in San Francisco. And I got a job. And that was my sliding door moment. The rest is history.
That's so funny. It's actually, I almost did the other way around, but it was in my SmartFlow days. I had my newcomer wife with a newborn son. We ran out of money because our investor into SmartFlow, it was already SmartFlow days, and I stopped working clinical practice. And then I had a co-founder of mine actually come to Canada, and we had $700 on my account to both fund the continuous operation in SmartFlow and for family. It was just like we had no money. And this is when I flew to Australia. And then someone bought me a ticket to fly to Australia and to showcase SmartFlow in Melbourne, Perth, Sydney, Brisbane. It was an incredible trip. And I came back with an investment of $150K. It was
wow, that's awesome.
It was very close. It was very close to, but when you live through those experiences, it kind of, it makes your skin a little thicker, I think. So
if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right?
Yeah. Well,
it feels like you're going to die some of these times.
It does. But that's the best thing about America. It really, it is the land of opportunity. And this American dream, it's not dead. There's so much great opportunity over here. And if you want it bad enough, it's there. Veterinary industry, I'm constantly seeing opportunities for good concepts and opportunities to succeed. But yeah, this country's given me a lot. And I remember like on the last weekend before I got this job, a couple of my buddies over here are vets, and Alicia, the wife, is a Notre Dame alumni, and they were playing Stanford in college football. And we went down to a Stanford game with her, my friend Hayden from New Zealand, and her parents. And we literally had a couple of $100 left before we were flying home, and I hadn't got a job. And at that point, we were dead set that we were going back to the UK. So we thought, well, let's have a fun time before we go. But we still need some money to just to live and get to the airport. And we missed the second last train back to San Francisco from Stanford. We didn't have enough money for a taxi. We were on the train, and we missed the second last train. And my buddy said, hey, come back to the bar, have another drink. The next train's in 45 minutes. So we went back, and then we came back to the station, but the train was leaving from another platform. And we realized to get to the other platform at Stanford, you've got this long underground ramp that's like a freaking mile long. And we sprinted and we missed the last train. So we had to book into a hotel in Stanford at the cheapest one was like $300 a night. And I just remember my partner, Joe, and I just falling asleep crying, going, hey, we've got no money. We can't afford the hotel. And it's strange. You look back now and you just think, how do we make it? And that was just beginning of some of the challenges. We bought Groveway Veterinary Hospital, our first hospital, about 3 months later. And that first step into ownership came with a lot of its own challenges that we look back on and go, how do we make it through that? It was a fun time, but it does create a level of desperation and the fact that you've got no option. I would die before I'd go back to Australia or the UK with my tail between my legs. And, all the doubters who said, why are you moving to America? I'd never go back and admit that they were all right.
So awesome. Andrew.
So I had to work.
It's hilarious. There's a saying in a book that I love. It says, you've got to be willing to burn your ships and not give yourself a chance to retreat. So success is the only option. And it's really interesting, your story. And I remember in our first call talking about it, and you had kind of teased out, you're not really an innovator. And, now that we're almost at the end of the show, I'm going to try to pull this all together, and I think you are an innovator. I think what you've done at VetnCare, particularly around your focus on, training and mentorship and just the way that you run the organization, I'd like to tease that out a little bit before we run out of time, because it's burning pretty quick here. So so what is unique about what you've built, and why are you so passionate about it?
I always wanted to create a legacy and do something impactful to the industry to change it for the better. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, my passion started with animals, and then it became a passion for clinical teams, and then it sort of focused on clients. But I think I've come full circle with the realization that our veterinary professionals, if we can engage and celebrate them and help them be their best selves, and the patients and clients sort of get taken care of indirectly. And I think what's unique about what we've done is, firstly, we've done it privately. And yes, we've had 10 years to do it, but through that time, the competition has grown and the market has shifted dramatically. A lot of our competitors are currently, in fact, almost all of them are backed by private equity groups. And to be able to compete on that stage, continue to grow and do some really good things that are unique in the industry against those organizations with resources 10 times our size is something that I'm really proud of. We have built a really large business that's privately held and owned by veterinarians, which is what we always seek out to do. And we're still privately owned, clinically led, and all the owners in the organization are veterinarians, which was the whole concept of the joint venture partnership model. But I'm also, I think, really proud of what we do clinically. So in the UK and Australia, there's primary care, which I guess is like your Banfield or Thrive businesses. There's secondary care, and then there's tertiary care. Tertiary care in the UK is specialty, university practices. Secondary care is not really done in the UK. Secondary care is where primary care clients go for a second opinion or a higher level of general practice. And that niche doesn't really exist in the US, I think primarily because there's such a big referral model, and the vet schools sadly really encourage their veterinarians, the GPs, to refer everything. And I don't understand it. For me, it's a catastrophic issue in the industry, because veterinarians refer away a lot of their remuneration. It impacts their learning and development, because unless you're practicing these skills, you don't get any better. And clinical stagnancy is rife and a huge impact in the industry. And simultaneously, it affects businesses. And so we really fill that niche of secondary care. And so within our group, we call it advanced general practice, but within our group, we have GPs doing TPLOs. We're putting CT into 3 locations next year. We do advanced exotics. All our vets and technicians do bonded sealants. A number of our vets are doing root canal training next year. Fracture repair, advanced imaging, ultrasounds, a minimum database, endoscopy, oncology. So we take on a caseload that's quite different. And we do that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I feel it's an obligation to provide the community with access to great care. In the Bay now, a TPLO costs $8,500. I can't live in a world where only a rich dog can get a stifle repair surgery, when a lateral suture can be done for $3,000 and can help the majority of dogs at a high level. So I think, my passion for advancing GPs is to make care available to a broader set of the community and help patients more broadly, but also learning and development. We know, you look at all the studies in every industry, learning and development is a key aspect of engaging employees and making them enjoy their jobs. And we do such a crap job of it in veterinary practice. Your CEs to go to WVC, which is a great conference, by the way, I'm not detracting from that, but to sit through a lecture that they're teaching to final year vet school. I don't want to learn that stuff. I want to learn how to do a root canal or a fracture repair or advanced ultrasound. So learning and development in this industry is so basic and primitive. And unlike the UK and other countries, we really don't help veterinarians in practice advance their skills to the new level. And that's what keeps me going. Every day I'm learning stuff. That's why I love being a veterinarian. But if I'm working at a sort of primary care institution and doing vaccines and scale and polishes every day of my life, no wonder I'm mentally unwell and dissatisfied with my profession, because I'm not learning anything. And I think learning and development is one of the important outputs or rewards you get professionally that help offset the challenges that we associate with burnout and that type of thing. And so I think, if I'm summarizing the 5 things that we really do differently, it's that our joint venture partnership model, our advanced general practice, our sort of independent, privately held AHA status is something we're proud of. The fact we're clinically led, a lot of the main decision makers in the business are veterinarians, and I think that model does work. We're not financially incompetent. We can run successful businesses by having clinical leadership as some of the key decision makers. And then, an emphasis on mental wellness and professional happiness, I think, is something that we live and breathe, mostly because I've suffered with mental unwellness, and I think it's important to me to be my best professional self, and I realized I had to make some big changes in my life to really be that person. And because of that, I can role model and set an example for my fellow professionals who perhaps are just starting their career and haven't been through some of the hardships that I've faced.
And we have so much to talk about. so
we'll ask another question.
We need to go fishing.
I'd love that. Yeah,
so much resonated with me.
Don't get me on a fishing trip.
It was so funny. As I was talking to Andrew, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm going to introduce Andrew to Ivan, and they're going to be friends, and I'm going to have to sit through listening to them ask each other questions."
My new favorite book, and we'll have to round it up here, but my new favorite book, and I'll ask you about yours, is Drive by Daniel Pink. And it's, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And mastery is what veterinarians are good at. They want to be continuously improved. And if you're poking vaccines every day and there's no advancement, no wonder we burn out. You're absolutely right there. So anyway, that's so inspiring that you're doing all of that stuff. We do have to keep it to the 20 minutes. I think we went over, but it was too exciting to stop. But at the end, we asked 2 questions. So what is the book, TED Talk, or video, or something that people could read, listen, or view and get a little bit more wisdom of Andrew Moffat?
Well, I like Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but I think it really helped me with an understanding of the impact sleep has on physical and mental health, perhaps more important than exercise and nutrition. But it gets so little airtime that, it's all about nutrition and exercise. There's no sexy ads or campaigns on the importance of sleep, not only for adults, but predominantly for children. And, I learned a lot about the damages of chronic sleep deprivation. But from a veterinary aspect, I think that there were some interesting links to the start point of internships and residencies. And I think the concept of modern day residencies and the internship programs was started by a guy called William Halstead in the late 1900s. I think he was the chief surgeon at the Johns Hopkins University, and he set the tone on these crazy internships and residencies, these 14-hour days and non-stop overnight type of stuff, and that set the tone for internships and residencies in the healthcare profession. It turns out years later that he's a coke addict, and that's the only way. Right? And that's the only way. He was an incredible
surgeon, and he was addicted to coke. Of course,
and everyone's going, "How's this guy doing it?" Of course, we have to be like him. But they only found out years later he's a coke addict. But that set the tone, and I think it's so damaging to our profession. And I know a lot of the vet schools are being more thoughtful about internships and residencies, but it still hasn't changed completely. And the fact that, we know that sleep deprivation damages or impacts people's mental health. But at vet school, which is so highly regarded, and these internships and residencies so highly regarded, if that's a standard the industry sets, and that's the expectation of excellence, that you have to put yourself through that level of self-deprivation, then we've got a long way to go. And the frustrating thing for me is the vet schools talk about mental wellness and work-life balance, but then they still host an internship and a residency where, there's still celebration around doing a 10, 14-hour critical care shifts in a row. And yes, people say, oh, it's not good, but they still do it and celebrate it. And it's a path towards being successful in this industry. So I think the vet schools have a lot to answer for. Until the vet schools get serious about setting the right tone on mental wellness and setting these graduates up to truly succeed in the modern day industry, we're lost. And the difficulty is the vet schools are so impactful or influential to the AVMA that the AVMA also continues to be a crap organisation that doesn't really represent its people, because it's influenced by the vet schools and a generation that's not really connected to the current veterinary professionals who are practicing in the trenches. So that's where I'd like
Andrew. Andrew. Gonna have to cut you off, my friend.
I know I'm chatty.
I think it's fair to say that you are absolutely an innovator. So thanks for joining us for the call. We have
my pleasure.
One last question for you. Who's another innovator in the space that you think we should have on the show so our listeners can learn from them as well?
So someone, not only is he a great guy because he impacts the veterinary industry, but he's also a fly fisherman who's almost obsessed as I am. That's why you guys love him. But Tony Bartels at the Vin Foundation is just one of the best guys. He has dedicated his career to financial acumen and helping students and younger graduates with their debt management. And he really is the world leader on student debt management in America. And he's just a great guy. He gives so much of his time freely to help veterinarians and set them up to have a good plan with their student debt. He's a great guy, and I think he'd really add to your podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.